series has been really good for me in learning. When that day comes for me, like it's like, oh, okay, now I have a series here that I listen to, can go back to help me navigate through the times when that happens.
But you had good parents too, didn't you?
I did. Yeah.
So
I'm very grateful for good parents.
That's a privilege and such an advantage.
Correct. Oh, definitely. And you even speaking today, well, you do say a lot that, parenthood is hard.
It's hard.
And it's tough. And what do you see the differences of parenting today from, let's say, 20 years ago or even before then?
That saying, it takes a village to raise a child. Mm-hmm. And I think in the American culture, we really believed that. Mm-hmm. So we could trust our teachers and our workers in any kind of social sphere. We could trust that they would help us. We often tell stories about in our neighborhood that you could be disciplined by a neighbor 3 blocks away because your parents trusted them to keep an eye out for your kids and make sure they're doing the right thing. And there was an accepted rightness and morality and all of that. So you were raised not only by your parents, you were raised by your church community and by your neighborhood. Okay. Things have changed a lot now. We no longer have people who are helping us. We have people who are antithetical to everything we're trying to do. And you have a culture that's going in the opposite direction that is anti-God, anti-Christ. And that sounds aggressive to a lot of people, but if you really think about it, it really is. The Christian in today's world is seen as weak intellectual, is seen as somebody that's the stifling progress. So there is a concerted effort, no matter what people tell me, they'll stand up and tell me that, and then I'll go do a little bit of research and go find out, I'm sorry, but the National Teachers Union, their goals and objectives are terrible. Mm-hmm. And our university, our secular universities, even the ones that were founded on Judeo-Christian values, that's just not there anymore. And it's important that we acknowledge that. Mm-hmm. It's just not there anymore. So it's not just that they're not helping us, they're hurting us. Mm-hmm. There's a concerted effort to rid our culture of the Judeo-Christian values.
Yeah.
And it's been accelerated over the last 20 years because of things like abortion and same-sex marriage. And now we have the gender dysphoria and the gender agenda. Mm-hmm. And so now, again, Christians are on the wrong side, according to modern culture of history, and they're on the wrong side of progression. So when a culture believes that, they're going to do everything they can to undermine that. So here's why it's difficult now. 20 years ago, we had everybody, if they weren't on our side, they weren't against us, okay? Now, not only do you not have people on your side trying to accomplish the same goal, they're trying to undermine you. Mm-hmm. And that's why you see, especially in the state of California, which tends to lean extremely left, you now have a culture that actually believes they know better than we do how our kids should be raised. And they don't want to take any chance on parents indoctrinating their children in a way that is not consistent with the way the state or the government as a whole wants to go. Mm. And so that's why you have to be more intentional than you've ever been. I said it's hard and harder, but I didn't say impossible, because still your greatest influence is your mom and dad. So your mom and dad can teach you and train you. It's always meant to be that way so that you are protected from much of where culture and society is going. Yeah. So as Christ followers, it simply means that we got to be more intentional.
Right. Oh, definitely. As you were saying, the beginning part, I was reminded of, so growing up with good parents and growing up with my grandma, she would always play old TV shows. Mm-hmm. And so I honestly grew up with the Andy Griffith Show, and I grew up with Little House on the Prairie. And as you were just talking about that, it takes a village. Those two shows really were the prime example of who was Andy's son's name? Opie. He really was raised by the city that he was. His dad was the sheriff in.
Not only that, but look at the television programs that our kids grew up on then. Mm-hmm. Very different. Yeah. There was a moral to the story, and the moral was usually based on Judeo-Christian values.
Correct.
Don't take what doesn't belong to you. Tell the truth. Be a truth. Have integrity. Have character. Yeah. Those were all things that we were raised on. Not so today. Not so today at all. Everything is situational. There's no absolutes. And so, man, it's confusing, but that doesn't mean that we don't have absolutes. The pastor always had
Come on,
his phone off.
always
I'm sorry,
doing
man. Come on,
something.
Pastor Jeff. But it doesn't mean that we still have tremendous power, and that's why the local church is the hope of the world, because it's in the future, present and the future, the church needs to take the place of what the schools once were. Now it can be a place where we do trust our Sunday school teachers, our ministers, our pastors. And I know there's failure there too.
Right.
But for the most part, we trust our pastors and our teachers and our leaders to help and assist us, not to judge us, but to help and assist us as we raise our children the best way we know possible.
Yeah.
And there's the God factor. You know,
Right.
when you teach a child that God is real, that there's a relationship with God through Jesus Christ, that gives the child the very thing that every other worldview is trying to give a child but can't. And that is emotional stability, the faith and trust that God is large and in charge. And even when my life is not going well, even when it doesn't turn out the way I hope that it would, or well, I think it should, I still have faith and trust that there's something eternal, something that I can depend on. And that's what children want more than anything else, to know that I can depend on someone who doesn't change, who loves me, who gives me significance, who gives me purpose in my life. And there's no one who can do that other than God.
Yeah. And that's why it's so important, as you were teaching, that parents are not teaching necessarily a moral viewpoint or just what is objectively true, but instead they're teaching that there is objective truth, but the path to that is the relationship with God.
Yeah. And that's what changes and impacts our children to the greatest degree. That's why I said, just quickly in the message, I said, you know, there's a lot of good parenting and a lot of bad parenting ideas, and nobody's going to get it all right. You just can't. It's difficult. And each child is difficult and different.
Correct.
And but I said, let's talk about some non-negotiables. Here are things that have worked for thousands of years. You know, I read from the most ancient manuscript of child raising, Deuteronomy. You know, so by the way, Deuteronomy, most people don't know, means second law, and it's a word that was meant to convey that you have the law now of God, but this is the law of practical law of how the family works. And as I said in the previous conversation episode, I'm not sure it was ever a good idea to send our children away for 8-10 hours a day and let somebody else teach and control them. And I still don't think it's a good idea. I still think it's best when the parents have more input into the life of the child than any other figure, authority figure. And I think we've got to reevaluate, especially in today's times, how we're doing education.
Yeah.
I really do. And I think now that you can do so many things online, that we can supply our children with the information while the parents are the teachers. And they remain home. You say, well, what about the social life? You still have social life. Man, there are clubs, soccer clubs, basketball clubs, football clubs. You can still have all of that. My wife and I raised our kids in New Zealand. We homeschooled them. And yet we had kids at our house from about noon to dark every day playing rugby and basketball and games, and you just have to be intentional about it. But you don't want to shelter them and not, from the world where they don't understand that you're still called to go out into the world and make disciples, go to the highways and the byways, the hedges, whatever. But you still, in those early formative years, I'm talking from the age of 0 to 10 to 12, those early formative years are teaching, training years. After that, go to high school, fine. But you need a strong, strong foundation. And I think your children are going to struggle to get that today in a secular world that's trying to debunk God.
Correct.
I know you have good teachers in all schools. I got that, but I'm not so sure 1 or 2 good teachers are going to be able to undo so many others in their philosophy and what they teach.
Right, and their social surroundings of whatever is trying to influence them that is outside of what God wants for their hearts.
In my opinion, and it's only an opinion, but from 0 to 12, no cell phone. What does a kid have a phone?
Yeah.
Why does a kid have a phone 8, 9, 10 years old? You're just asking for it. No phones. And or maybe you have a phone, but it only is a calling machine.
Correct.
To stay in touch with your kids, a good thing. But there's got to be limits and there's got to be boundaries at that age, too influential. And then as they get older and trustworthy, there's more freedom.
Yeah. When I was 12 is when I got my first phone.
Yeah.
but it was a Razor. I don't know if you remember those, the flip phones.
Nokia? Was it? I think. It was called a Razor?
Yeah, it was called a Razor, but the company was Motorola.
Motorola. Well, I can't believe you remembered that. Motorola. I think they were the first. And Nokia, maybe, I don't know if that was a name brand or what, but that was popular in New Zealand. That's what I had to. You flip that baby open and push the numbers.
Yeah, exactly.
You could send a text though, couldn't you?
Yeah, you send text and you can call, but that was about
Facebook, Snapchat.
None of that, which is, I mean, I'm thankful that at 12 years old, I was able to have that type of phone.
Yeah.
But now at 12 years old, you're getting a smartphone,
which is really stupid.
Yeah, exactly. And unleashes so much, there's so much access to what you can view on your smartphone.
So back to basically what I was trying to communicate is there are 6, what I think non-negotiables.
Correct.
These are things that you do that no matter what's going on. And if you do these things, I believe you're going to win. Mm-hmm. Now, there's no guarantees, but I believe the chances of winning are significantly increased. So that is, you introduce them to God early on in life and you teach them what God is like. And there are so many resources that you model that, what you believe and what you say you believe. You try your best. Nobody's perfect, but you try your best to model that in the home, because they're going to learn more from what happens at home than they are at church. Teach them to pray. Introduce them to God. You teach them to pray. You teach them the importance of belonging to a group of believers, for accountability, for mentorship, for all of those things. The village raising the child. So as you go back and I encourage people to go back and review the message and look at those 6 things, write them down, put them on your refrigerator door, put them somewhere, just remind you and continue. Look, I can mess up a lot of things, but if I can focus and concentrate on these 6 things, I think I'm going to win. And I believe that you will.
Oh, definitely. One of the things that you talked about was teaching them to listen to the voice of God.
Yeah.
And I feel like, if taking a look at church history, why is it that parents seem to be more afraid of what they will teach their kids or what culture will teach their kids? So they kind of just shove them to a youth night, or they shove them to a weekend, and they're kind of like, well, I'm kind of relying on you as the pastor. I'm relying on you as the youth pastor to teach them in the right way, because I don't know, what is that? What is that fear that parents have?
And you know, that again goes to your first question about the difference. In the past, you could get away with that because you had a village, you had teachers, you had so many other people helping. You could get away with that. You can't do it anymore. You can't do it. The youth group or the youth time or the church is only a small aspect of social life. Yeah. You're going to have to be more intentional at home, and that means a lot of parents both have to work. I told you my preference a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah,
I would rather sacrifice finance and have one parent home with the kid. For some, that's impossible. It just won't work. Yeah. And I understand that. So that's why I was gentle there. But if that's you, man, that means parenting's even tougher now. That means when you come home at night, because we're all tired, you're going to have to set aside a couple of hours to reinforce the things that we talked about. And, you know, it's not even a couple of hours. If you think about it, one of the things I did when we were raising our kids is when I got home, I was responsible because Robin had them all day. Right. I bathed them. You know, I took them to the bath, played games with them, but I spent the last probably hour to hour and a half in their room at night, reading John MacArthur's Faith to Grow On, playing little games with them, asking them questions, praying with them. So, you know, even an hour, just 1 hour set aside every night is so influential. It's the last thing they do before they go to bed. It's the thing that they will remember. And having Bible verses all over their room, you know how many children just stare at the wall before they go, you know, most of them.
Right.
So having Bible verses, key Bible verses over your door, the entryway to your home. I'm not saying saturate your wallpaper's Bible verses, although it's not a bad idea.
It's not a bad idea.
But if you take key verses and put them around your house. And then the idea that you're praying before meals, the idea that you have meals together is so important. Now, as they get older, I know you're going to have high school, you know, track practice, soccer practice, tennis practice, basketball practice. It becomes more and more difficult. That's why the ages 0 to 12 so important.
Are vital.
So important. And my advice is, man, when the kid's that young, if that kid is so busy he can't be home in the evenings at that age, then he's too busy. Not 0 to 12. Don't let culture and society take your kids from you that early.
Yeah.
It's too early.
Yeah.
So I remember, I played basketball, but until I was high school, 13 years old, I didn't start staying out that late at practice. It just didn't happen that way. Kids need to be home.
Yeah, they definitely need to be home. Okay, but even with that, all good stuff, obviously, and I agree. But even as we look at like just the world surrounding us and just the secular view, just infiltrating the educational system and just influence outside, there is unfortunately that same I guess agenda that's infiltrating the churches as well. I mean, we're having a lot of churches with big debates and big division on a lot of topics. And so I want to ask you more about what does a parent do when their child is coming back from a youth night or coming back from youth group or whatever it is, and they're saying, my youth pastor is going against what the lead pastor is doing or was saying, or like when there's that division, they see it and they're really rocking like their theology.
If I was a parent and I trusted my pastor, and that's why you need to be very careful of submitting or committing to a church. Find a fellowship that you can trust. And my teenager came home and said, our youth pastor said this, and I knew that wasn't consistent. I would go to the pastor. I'd go immediately to the lead pastor. I would go right over. I would. I just would, because that's a serious thing.
Correct.
The other thing is, and this might be a good time, I'm going to preach, in my mind, one of the most difficult sermons of my life next week. So I don't want to give too much away.
Yeah.
But part of the problem that our parents face right now is they are in churches. Oh man, the secular worldview has infiltrated the church. I don't want to be one of those guys that just, our church is the truth. There are great churches all around me. So let's just say that again. There are great preachers everywhere. But there are also churches that are really for the sake of having larger numbers and building their own kingdom, sacrificing what they believe to be non-essential truths. And because of that, the irony is you end up sacrificing your future for the pleasure of the present, because what you think is going to give you great numbers in the end will destroy your church. I mean, look at churches, denominations like United Church of Christ. Look at the disciples of Christ. Look at these denominations. They're whittling away to nothing because they stand for nothing. So if you want to know what it's going to look like in 20 years, just go look at the denominations who decided 20, 30 years ago, we're not going to stand for anything.
Right.
It's all, really what is truth? What do we really know? Let's just be social activists. Let's just go out and make sure we're compassionate. Well, in their church, there's nothing to them. They are denominations that are dying. Dead or dying. Some of them are dead, they just don't know it yet. And so I don't want to be that guy that says, unless you do what we do, believe exactly the way we believe. However, there are what we call evangelical truths that the evangelical church abides by. Yeah, we're going to have differences on how often we take communion. We might have differences on, the sovereignty of God, the free will of man. Those are not essential things. And when you make those essential things, that's when then you start creating tension that you don't need to create. Those are theological questions that we've been asking for hundreds of years that are not a test of faith and have no impact on your salvation. However, there are other things that culture has tried to determine and demand the church accept that, Drew, they're just sin. There's no better way to say it. Sex between two people of the same sex is wrong. It's a sin against God. It's a sin against design. Do we love people who struggle with same-sex attraction? Of course we do, and you're welcome here. But you're never going to find me telling you that it's acceptable. In the same way that a young man sleeping with his girlfriend in a heterosexual relationship that aren't married, I'm also going to accept, come on in, but I'm also going to tell them you're wrong. And repent. Stop sinning. And so my point is, when you You've got churches now who are telling you, look, sleeping with your boyfriend, you're not married, that God understands that, that there are other issues. Hey, if you want to involve yourself in a same-sex relationship, that's okay. No big deal. If you want to transition from a boy to a girl, that's okay. Those kind of things are coming in. And here's what's happening. And here's a good example. You've got this question that's floating around right now on social media. Should a Christian parent attend the gay son's wedding? Big question. And I've read the discussions. They're quite amazing to me, because basically what they're saying, well, we want to keep the bridge open to people who disagree with us. So the idea is the way you keep the bridge open is you don't take a stand against it. Okay, now I want you to think about that logic for a moment. So what you're telling me is that you're really never going to stand against anything because you're afraid you'll break the bridge down and you won't have access. And what I'm telling you is it's not the Christians who are burning the bridges. We want to keep the bridge up. We don't want you to separate from us just because you don't agree with us. And we don't want to cast you out because you don't agree with us. We want the bridge to stay. We're not the ones throwing the bridge. It's the other side that says, unless you believe like we do, we want nothing to do with you. We're not saying unless you believe like we do, we want nothing to do with you. We want to still have a relationship. We want to talk about these issues. We don't hate you. You hate us. And so that's what's going on right now. In the name of, well, I don't want to be a wall builder. I want to be a bridge builder, which in theory is good, but not when it comes to the point where you're asking me to sacrifice the truth of God's word in order to be your friend.
Right.
So I like to use the example. So you go back to the question of, should a parent attend the wedding of gay marriage? And my answer is always no. All right, this is going to be a drastic illustration, but I think you give drastic illustrations to illustrate the point.
Yeah.
If I wanted to have a party to celebrate my abortion, would you come? Okay, I'm having an abortion. I want to celebrate the end of this life. So would you come? I am going to have a celebration to celebrate my polygamy. I've decided I'm going against this, and I'm going to have more than one wife. Come and celebrate this. We say, oh, that's different. No, all three are sinful. When you attend a wedding, you're not just celebrating, Drew. You're saying, we acknowledge this union and we pray for its blessing and we give it our blessing. How can a Christ follower attend something like that in celebration when it would wound the heart of God? And again, you say, well, if I don't go, then I'll lose my relationship. Well, no, what you do is you go to your son and you say, I love you. I'll do anything for you. But this is against the core of my belief. And I hope it doesn't cause us to separate, but I cannot celebrate this with you. The bridge is not being burned by the Christians. No. The bridge is burned by the other side. Right. Because typically it's, well, I'm mad, I'm angry, because they want us so bad to affirm, but we can't. And so I'll talk more about that in the messages to come. Yeah. But this is one of the this is why, again, parenting is so much more difficult in this generation, because parents love their kids and you want to keep loving your kids no matter what they do, and you want to make sure they know you're my son and you're my daughter no matter what you do. But there are some things you're going to do that I can't join in the celebration. Correct. I mean, come on, let's say the kid wants to have a party. Everybody gets drunk and there's an orgy. Do I have to be there or I'm separated from my son or my daughter? And the real problem you're having is that I don't see a gay marriage as something that honors God. And you're mad because I don't see that, but you can't change that in me. Right. Now, all of that may be a little aggressive, and it might be the conversation podcast may be the time for us to discuss those things. And there's a lot of other things that are involved that I'll share in the future. Yeah. But this is why we're in a time when it's so difficult to be a good parent. Correct. Because it's our kids, when they don't agree with us, they've been taught by culture to cancel, shame, and separate rather than have dialogue and still love each other. Correct. Which is literally the crux of keeping your family close-knit together, is finding the things that you taught, just circling like literally all of that back to the importance of
practicing these 6 principles that you gave.
Yeah. And that's the what's the old phrase I'm looking for? 1 ounce is something is worth 10 ounce prevention, whatever. I can't remember, but it was a good one.
Yeah,
sometimes it's the old man. It's the old man. But you're right. That's why do this while they're young.
Yeah,
chances are high that if you do this while they're young, while they're 0 to 12, there's so much you're not going to have to deal with.
Yeah.
If you don't do it, or you're lackadaisical in your approach to teaching your faith to your children, man, it's going to open up the door to so many things.
Correct.
And I'm in a family. Just quickly, maybe this is a good way to end. Drew, I'm in a family where I get 2 examples. So I've got you. So my wife and her sister. So you've got 2 kids raised the same way by 2 Christian parents. Bible reading, prayer. But as these daughters raised their children, one passed it on. The other was extremely lackadaisical. Okay. And so did not draw the same boundaries, did not have the same prerequisites. Now, there was still some spiritual involvement, but you got 2 and as a result, you got 2 very different outcomes. So what you pass down to your children that you learned from your parents means everything. I mean, so that's how you can have 2 sisters from the same family end up with 2 totally different set of problems when it comes to their children.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's just the way it is.
Yeah, I kind of to come off of that, why it's important to not only see these as you teaching your children, but you even implementing these things in your own life.
Yeah.
Because I think the times when my parents taught me biblical values, it was cool. But then when I saw my parents live them was a game changer, because that's when I knew there is a God who is real, who loves us. Because I'm seeing my parents go through stuff that is either really tough or really joyful. And in the middle of all of that, they've practiced these things.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't remember a lot. I remember some things because my dad was clever, but I don't remember a lot of things they said. But I remember just about everything they did.
Yeah.
I look back even now at my parents, and I realize how smart they were. Not smart intellectually, educated, just clever in the way that they demonstrated for us. Yeah. They knew the way to continue the pattern that they wanted to develop in us, because neither of my parents had Christian parents. Huh. So you think about that. They broke the cycle.
Right.
And then they thought, they intentionally, how can we create faith and teach our children about God in such a way that would go with them through the rest of their lives, and then they would pass on to their children. Yeah. And you know what? It worked, because all 4 of us have faith, and all 4 of us have passed it down to our children. Yeah. And the only one that made the mistake was the one who got so rigorous in it that taught it was more intellectual than relational, and that chased kids away. Yeah. Man.
Which that makes a big difference, specifically because I've talked to, I guess you'd say my generation, or I guess my older brother's generation kind of came from that like purity culture era of where it's like, well, if we just teach this and then teach that, sex outside of marriage is wrong, but they never taught them actually a good biblical sexual ethic. Yeah. They were either damaged and all of this stuff. And so that's what happens when you're legalistic. That's what happens when either you are afraid to have that dialogue, and even to just like encourage parents who are listening to this and who are hearing you even talking about gay marriage and all this stuff, that if you practice these 6 principles, if you actually put these and develop this in your own heart, those conversations with your kids or those conversations with your children will be a lot easier than if you've never implemented these. Agreed. Because you're too afraid, because you want to be the bridge builder and not the building a wall. But when you practice these things, I feel like your child, and this is by even example for me of like even times where I was scared to approach my parents about a subject, in reality, because I knew who they were, I knew how they lived, and I knew they walked with Jesus, I was always okay to be like, can I talk to you guys? Yeah. And it was so much easier.
Same way with my dad and my mom. When I did the big sin, I call it, when I was 16, and I've never described it, but when I committed my big sin at 16, man, my dad sat me down and extended such grace and love and mercy to me and said, now you did the wrong thing. Yeah. And it's not how I taught you. However, Here's what we do from here.
Correct.
And I could not believe I could still live at home. I mean, it was that bad. And I learned, right then and there, man, I learned the grace of God, of a loving father, while at the same time responsibility. Because my dad, you'll own this. You're going to own this, and you're going to repent. And you're not going to run from it. And I didn't. Man.
And that's a whole different podcast to talk about responsibility.
Next time.
Yeah, definitely next time.
Next one's going to be, do not miss next weekend. I'm telling you, you do not want to miss.
Yeah.
Because all of these things we've hinted at,
yeah,
next week they're all going to come out. So
yeah, that's
don't
cool.
miss.
And keep the goal, a relationship with God. I think that's one of the best things of your sermon.
Introduce them to Jesus, he'll take care of it.
Exactly. Yeah.